Okay, well, I guess it'll probably just be us three then. Maybe some other people will join here, but in the interest of time here, we'll go ahead and get rolling. The roll call is pretty simple here, but um, the link to the last agenda, I'll post that into the group chat here so that you guys can follow along as well. Once you see that, is there anything in this list that we actually can have any input on at this time, or should we just roll right into what you wanted to cover there, Andrew?
I didn't really have a whole lot to cover. I just wanted to touch base with the group. I thought we were going to have a few more people here.
Oh, it looks like Arts Peter's joining, so that's nice.
So I'd like to get, because I mean, if we have anything to go over beforehand, then let's do that, and we can go into this next.
I'm just
I don't want to
posting.
get ahead of myself.
That's good. I'm sorry. I was posting into Slack there to see if Daniel had an agenda for this particular meeting. We'll see if he responds here, but I did not receive that over the weekend from him, so see if he has one. If not, we can kind of go through some of the stuff on the list here. There was some talk on the Active Directory last time, and it seems like some communication that was happening there, and Stephen West is the maintainer on that. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that based on this since last meeting. Okay, and I think that Sebastian spoke with EPO regarding the forms module, and that he was planning on joining the group. I have not seen any activity from him yet. Do you guys know if EPO was able to get tapped in or joined? All right. And I think as of the last meeting, Daniel was still waiting on a reply from someone regarding active forms. And I don't know if that happened either. I didn't see anything in Slack that was related to that over the last week. Anybody have a status on that?
Don't think anything has changed over time in the last 2 weeks about these points. I think there was a new release of the Active Directory, but on the active forums, I didn't see anything.
So there was a new release of Active Directory?
I thought so, that about 2 weeks back, there was a release of Active Directory. I'm not sure about that.
I know that last meeting they said it does work on 9.2 now, yep. And that Stephen West, who's now tapped into Slack here as well, is part of the team, and right. He's been invited to this meeting too, but I'm not sure if he's been able to join. Yep. Let's see here. I think Ernst Peter, you were working on a contributing template, and where do we stand on that?
As far as I know, I've finished the contributing template. I added that as a pull request into, I think, the reports repository. And I think Daniel asked other ones to review the text that's there in the contribution.md file. I think it's correct what is there, but it would be nice to have some other people looking into that and say, okay, the wording is correct, the English is correct, and it covers everything that we want to do in a contribution MD.
Excellent. So that was on the events repo?
No, reports.
Oh, reports. I'm sorry. Okay, let me pull it up. Was that also where the work was being done on some of the documentation kind of scaffolding? And it seems like we were leaning, or some were leaning a little bit more towards the wiki at this point. Is that still the case? Or?
Yeah, that's still the case. I tried. You have made the NV Quick theme or NV Quick theme using the GitHub IO pages. I start working on that, but I think there are a number of tools to be installed on Windows machine to get it up and running.
Yeah, we
And I
spoke about
didn't,
that. We spoke about it a
yeah,
bit last time, and I think there may have been a little bit of misconception on what's required and what's not really required to do it to maintain the docs. The only reason you need to get Jekyll and all that loaded on your own machine is if you want to run the docs site locally.
okay.
It's not required for the repo itself. That all happens automatically behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So it's really just getting it set up with the initial files that are required for GitHub Pages to process those and display it on the Pages site. So it's really not a roadblock really, unless you're just wanting to run the document site locally.
I looked at the NV Quick theme GitHub IO page, and I saw in order, for example, to get a menu, you have to do something. Otherwise, there's no menu.
That is
Yeah.
correct. And that what we could do, I was making this recommendation, but it's great that you're on this call too, because we can maybe come to some sort of next step on it. I am happy to, like, if we wanted to have a theme that we wanted to start from for the community, I'll be happy to do that initial work on one of the repos or something to get that set up. It took a while to kind of figure that out, but it's actually quite simple once you realize what's going on there.
Okay.
And it's really just YAML files and some front matters that's done there. And then there's a little bit of code snippet that you have to do to put a side menu navigation. And that's probably what we'll need on most of the repos anyway, is a side menu nav. And once you get that figured out, the rest of it is just maintaining markdown files.
Do you guys need, I have a couple of Jekyll websites that I've done in the past that I could send you links to the repos for just samples of different ways to use it and with the liquid syntax.
Yeah, that would actually be
nice.
cool. Do you have any, Andrew, that are closer to what we would be able to use for a starting design? Because I know the one that we used for NV Quick theme was, I think, the architect theme that's out there. And
yeah, so I've actually done some Jekyll websites from custom templates that I found or websites that I've built myself, and I've just I built Jekyll into them. And once you understand the templating engine, it's actually really simple. Like I'm gonna post a link in the chat. So this was a business venture that I did earlier this year that didn't work out, but the website's still up because it's free to host and I still own the domain. If you go to rockzam.com, this is a website that I modified a template that I got, but this is all built in Jekyll.
that's actually very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's 100% Jekyll. I host it with GitHub Pages, so it's free to host. And this is just a theme that I heavily modified. And I could send you the code to that one if you wanted to take a look at that.
Well, my initial feel is this is more like a website. I think what we'll need is probably, and Mercy, let me know if you think differently, but it seems to me that we need something that's more just documentation driven type layout. I mean, like, this is beautiful, but this is more like a website, right?
Right.
If you look at the repository of the reports, I have a wiki that essentially is nothing more than a list of pages, and you browse through them. And I didn't get much energy from converting those simple wiki pages into something that is a little bit more. So what would be nice if we get some template and say, okay, this is structure how we want to deliver documentation about different community extensions. In the most simple way, it's just a list of pages like you see here. It's a little bit plain here. It would be nice if we have some better layout than that's just what the wiki is providing, but that's it.
So what you want to do, let me pull up a different one that I have. My old blog was written in it, and basically,
Oops, that's not what I meant.
where is it? They're supposed to, I'm looking at the code for my old blog right now that has.
So Andrew, I don't know if you've seen this one, but like,
that's the architect theme, right?
That's the architect theme.
Deal.
but I think, and we could use this as a starting point, I suppose.
It's
But it would be
excellent
nice
for
to
me.
have
Yeah,
something, that's nice and
standardized.
branded. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, Ernst Peter, should we use the reports repo since you had the activity there, just kind of as a guinea pig on
Yeah,
this?
I started with the GitHub IO pages over there. So I made the connection that there is, I think, a docs folder there that contains the first index.md, I think something. And I did the
Oh, yeah.
settings. Yeah, I did the settings. So this will generate the
Okay.
simple thing, but that's all I got at this point.
Well,
Yeah.
that's perfect then. So it's really okay. Yeah, you've got the basics here. So you got
So,
the name of it.
Dave, can I share my screen real quick?
Absolutely. I think I have to stop my share in order for you to do that. Okay, I think you should be able to do it now.
Let me do desktop 2, I think. What screen are you guys seeing?
We are seeing the GitHub header.html.
Okay, cool. So this is, I'll send a link to this in the chat as well. So this is, where'd the chat go? I will send a link to it later. It disappeared when I went to go. Is it up here? There it is. So this is a link to my old blog, which I don't use, but the code's still here. And this was this is when GitHub first started doing the Jekyll pages for GitHub pages. And so I wanted to point out a couple things of how the websites are formatted. So there's this includes folder. And this is where you could start putting in different sections onto the Jekyll website. So I believe I have it in my header section. So we have a section inside of our configuration that says we want site pages. So then I can, for each page, I can go and display the link. So all we need to do is generate the markup in CSS that goes along with this, and we can break out the sections into the different Jekyll areas, so then we can parameterize it. So if we were going to go ahead and solve this, what I would almost recommend is start, if someone's unfamiliar with Jekyll and just wants to help with the HTML and CSS side of stuff, start with just an HTML and CSS files, build out the general format, and then we could port it very easily into Jekyll. And I could help with those include files that we have here for the different areas. Could help set up the different layouts to go along with it. Like there's a layout for just a general page I have. In this case, I was a blog, so there's a layout for general post. So we could break that out into different sections for the documentation, and then it would just generate the necessary links on that side panel like you were recommending. So I guess.
Right. So just to kind of connect the dots here, because I know it was a little bit fast, but just to connect the dots, the underscore layouts, and sometimes there's an underscore data as well. Those are typically in HTML. Everything else, as far as the actual documentation content, though, it can actually be HTML or Markdown. I would recommend that we stick with Markdown because
I like Markdown.
it's easier for non-developers to contribute at that point. And I think that's really the whole purpose.
Yeah. So this is a post file from the blog. I just put in some parameters at the top here, and then it's all Markdown. So this is a very simple one that I did. Let's go to a more complex one. Here's a complex one. So let's open up the raw view. So, we got, code snippets in here, which we can do. It's built right into Jekyll. There's an extension we can configure to do code highlighting.
But I think for most of the repos, I mean, and this is cool, but I think for most of them, we need to keep it real simple. Like,
I like a standard format like you have for your MP QuickSight. And if there's a standard structure and a standard file naming, it is nice for the first layout. It's nice to have a similar layout for all the different community extensions that we support. And I like the MD file as well. So it's all there, at least for the different repositories that I did. There's a number of wikis already filled. I'm not very positive about people contributing to documentation. Because I
Yeah,
know,
we'll see.
yeah,
We've had a few. I think the good news is when somebody does have something to contribute,
yeah,
that's a great opportunity for them
right,
to dip their feet into the water a bit of GitHub and learn a few things, and we can,
right.
use that as a teaching experience as well. Yeah, so it's one thing too that I mentioned is that for the repos that already have wikis, it's great
Hmm.
because what you can actually do is the wiki is really a repo within the repo. You just can't make pull
I
requests
know.
against it. So you can, as you know, you can clone it and then
Yeah,
just copy those MD files over
docs file.
the docs folder.
Yeah,
So like one like yours is probably the most complicated one, right? Of documentation that we would have.
hmm,
So you already kind of have it organized well. So it should just be a straight copy
yeah.
over of the files.
I've been experimenting with Git book as well. I've been experimenting with some other tools as well, because essentially what you mentioned is that the wiki is essentially a separate repository. You can clone it and make another one. I think for the events module, I already created repository events.wiki. But in the last 5 years, I never had anybody contributing any kind of documentation other than creating issues and asking for enhancements. So it's a fact of life. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I've had,
we've had a few requests that come in, but this is kind of why we bit the bullet
okay,
and figured out
okay.
Get
And
pages because we didn't have a way to
no,
really accept their
okay,
updates.
I made all the wikis completely open. So if anybody wants even online change some text in there, it's fine, but it never happens. But it would be fine to have a more, let's say, website type of documentation sites, and that's what I liked about your um, NV QuickSite GitHub IO, because it's nice. It looks like a website. It's easily maintainable. It's not that complex, and it gives it standard format.
Exactly. We could use this as an opportunity to kind of
Set a
maybe
standard.
do a nice blog. And if we have the standard, then hey, it doesn't matter what DNN community repo you go to. Here's how you would contribute
Right.
to documentation. So sometimes maybe the reason you haven't gotten
Yeah.
updates and stuff is because people just don't feel comfortable.
No. They sometimes they cannot find the wiki as well.
Yeah,
Like people
exactly.
cannot find the releases because they start cloning the repository in order to get the modules. But that's just a thing that will shift over time, I think.
Indeed. The other thing we'll need to think about too, as we kind of set up the structure of that, is that the README file is kind of that, and the description of the repo is usually the way to get
Yeah, I
to the
saw it. Yeah,
documentation. So one of the challenges that we have, and I think we need to kind of fix it on the NV Quick theme, is that we kind of repeat the home page content, if you will, with the README file, and I think that's probably a mistake. We should probably use the README file to just point people to the documentation
okay.
and don't go into too much detail.
Right.
That way you don't have duplicate content that you're trying to keep in sync.
But you have to build in a small teaser in the README file so people are willing either to
Exactly.
continue, but indeed not copy the whole introduction page of your documentation site, because then you have two places with the same information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you know of a way to get around that issue, like where you could actually just pull content into the README from another location, or so that they stay in sync? If you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine. Maybe we can take that as a potential.
So and you can get carried away with some of this stuff, obviously, and a couple things that I'm thinking with that. So one thing is, where's that line in the sand that you want to draw between having static content as your documentation source versus pulling it from some type of data source? That data source could be the README file, for example. And then taking it a step further, using, I don't know what the best practice for this is, but years ago I remember using a tool called Sandcastle Help Doc Builder for building
Those are
documentation.
all tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used that. That's the first one that comes to mind, because I haven't built like API documentation in a long time. But
CHM files.
but yeah,
That's,
I mean,
that's
but
what the one I used, the Sandcastle tool, I think about 7 years back. To
Oh,
build
yeah, no, this, I haven't used
.NET
this.
Nuke CHM. Yeah.
But the point still remains of where do we go? Do we start here and having complete static content, or do we go all the way over to the auto-generated tools and get something that builds all of the docs for us, and then we just add a couple pages to it? So, and the reason why I'm mentioning all this is what we could do with Jekyll that might be kind of slick is we could have the page set up, and maybe we could integrate it with some type of serverless like AWS Lambda, Azure Functions that would then call back to get the README file, and then we can inject that in. And that,
We might even be able to pull it from the other side too, though.
Yeah.
Like what I'm thinking is like from the docs, maybe pulling in the README there instead
Right.
of duplicating the README as the home page or something like that. So
yeah, and the question still remains, and that's why I said we can get carried away with this and do all sorts of things. You know, and
But
so where does that line in the sand is my question.
Let me ask, how many times does the README file changes? I'm happy to do it manually if it's only 1 or 2 or 3 times per year. And that's about
yeah,
right.
true.
And that's why
usually you write it once and update little teeny things here and there.
I'm more on the side of, you know, let's just set up a Jekyll GitHub page, make it static, and if we need to update README, just make sure that we keep them in sync. Yeah, it's a manual process. Maybe we can set up a GitHub bot. You know, maybe that's the automation that we do.
Yeah. What I'm more interested in is generating release notes automatically, because that is a lot of work if you do it manually. And yeah.
Are there solutions out there that, you know, I know we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but I guess it applies. Are there tools out there that helps you, like, okay, once you make a release in GitHub, from the time you make that release to the next time you're getting ready to make a release, are there tools that says, okay, here are all the commits, here are the issues, here are the, you know.
Essentially, I've selected I think about 5 different tools. I not evaluated all of them. And what they do is they can take the time gap between the last release and the next release. And if you format your pull request in your issues a little bit in shortened structure, you get a standard formatted MD release notes file that you, of course, can manipulate and edit a bit, but it will generate it for you based on the per pull request and the issues that are handled in that particular release. It's interesting because it will help to generate standardized release notes.
Is that something that gets built into the repo itself, or you do have to hook that in some other way? Or
there are some tools that you have to install, and then it will generate and collect the repository, and then it will go through all the pull requests and issues and extract the information and create a new MD file with the release notes of this particular release. And I think it's even related to the version number that you have. It will generate that automatically as well. I think about 4 or 5 tools that I selected. I think about 4 weeks back, I made a list of them.
But is that somewhere accessible, or are you just
no, somewhere in Slack.
That's not accessible. Somewhere in Slack. So is it before the 10,000 message cutoff?
That's a good point, Andrew, because
because if it is, then we got to pay a lot of money to get it.
Okay. No,
per user.
Oh my God. It might be that I've written it down somewhere as well, but I think it's somewhere in the development group somewhere. I can dig it up again. Yeah.
So based on your experience, do you believe that is something that that we could recommend to be done on all the community modules?
My idea was that we do testing with one of the repositories. I think it's even useful for .NET Nuke, the DNN core itself. We test it with one of the repositories and see, hey, how does it work? What do we have to format in the pull request, or do the format in the issues, so that it will generate it automatically. And then do one as an example, like your NV Quick Team site. It's also an example for me that teases me. Okay, I like that format. How can I achieve that? And how can we make that as a standard example? How we can do all the other DNN extensions that way. And it would be nice if we even could generate using these release notes into a release notes text or HTML file that is included in the zip in the install packages. So we get a automated line between the pull request and the essentially and install zip packages. But that's a longer term. Yeah, I know how much work it is to generate good release notes. Yeah,
it is, and they're so vastly different between repos, and some people
Right.
do them, some people don't do them. And when people do them, they do them different ways. So that would be nice to standardize
Yeah.
all the community modules. And also, I don't know if that could like be built into the release build
That's-
cycle as well. And maybe that's the best way to do it. I guess that's a good segue into the next thing. And Andrew, you can kind of chime in here on the automated builds and kind of where you're at on those.
I'll stop typing. I apologize. I'm so busy right now. I'm kind of doing stuff in half. I'm here and I'm not. I do apologize for that. But yeah, so automated builds. So in the agenda, Dave, that you posted, where did I put it? It's on one of my screens here. Anyways,
You won't be able to find it. It's in Google Docs.
yeah. No, I got
just kidding.
I got too many tabs open right now. I'm gonna open it back up. I'm gonna share the screen just so we can all see it. All right, we found it. We found something. Where was the build?
That would be 7.4.
7.4. Thank you, sir. All right, so automated builds. So things have been fluctuating quite a bit with VSTS right now. I'm not sure if you guys have heard the news, but they rebranded it to be called Azure DevOps. So we should probably update that name here. I can't update it, but so originally we were talking about using cake builds because we could, and then using VSTS to run the builds on the server because we'd be able to store, the build definition in code and know exactly what it's doing. And I wanted, and Oliver brought this to our discussion about using a YAML file, which is something relatively new that we can do in the build pipelines there, where you can pretty much store your build definition in code and then modify it in code. And then when we run the build server will be able to pick it up and understand the definitions. And the caveat to that from Cake is we wouldn't really be able to press a button and have the builds run locally. We would, we can get into we could end up doing both or do one or the other. And I kind of wanted to show a little bit of what a Cake build script might, not Cake build, a YAML build script might look like to give people an idea and just kind of discuss if we still want to go in the Cake direction because it supports the local building as opposed to just doing a pure YAML for VSTS, where that would obviously we'd be able to see what it's doing, but we can't run that script locally. And I kind of, I guess what are people's thoughts on going the pure YAML approach over the Cake approach?
I personally like the idea that I can run it locally.
Right,
So,
and that's the big thing. So then one of the things I was thinking was maybe we tell people you need to have a Cake script and a YAML script, but then we're asking developers to maintain pretty much two build scripts.
No. Yeah, I won't do that. Yeah.
I started work on Cake as well until I was yanked away into another project. But in my opinion, that is still, the way to go for our community.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that then. So with these updates, what we could do is, and at the end of the day, when we would set up our builds, it would still technically have a YAML file under the hood based on the different tasks and definitions that we set up inside of the .NET Foundation build system that we get. So I think it would still be a good idea to include the general Cake script inside, and then but it would still be calling the Cake build. So everything would be, so all the building would be done by the Cake build, and then maybe we could set up the automated release stuff inside the YAML, and or do we just not include it at all and just have it be defined on VSTS side? There's that as well. And then there's pros and cons to each. So just to clarify, we could set something up that has the builds, the definitions are defined and saved on the Azure DevOps server for DNN, or we could set it up where the build definitions are defined in the source control repository, and that way the developers could modify it if they wanted to, which if we want to give people that kind of control, maybe we don't want to give them that kind of control. Oh, I'll stop rambling.
If you talk about the DNN platform, I would say do it on VSTS. But if you talk about community extensions, please have it available that people can do it locally without having any kind of Azure VSTS type of account.
Well,
I would agree with that as well.
So I guess what I'm saying is we'd end up using both either way. One option is the VSTS definition that calls cake would be stored on VSTS versus the VSTS definition that calls cake would be stored on the repository itself.
Mm-hmm. I think the repository should be self-contained. So if I clone a repository, disconnect all my internet connections, I would be able to maintain the source code and do a build. That's how people, at least in my company, work most of the time.
Okay.
I had a question on the regarding .NET Foundation. I mean, forgive me if we've talked about this before, but I didn't remember. Our ability to use VSTS through them, I know we were using it on the platform and some of the other libraries off of the main DNN software organization. Does that extend to DNN community as well?
Yeah, so they've just done a lot of major announcements with it. And before it was, if you were a member of .NET Foundation, you get this public instance for free. They just made the announcement 2 days ago that if you're an open source repository project, you can get 10 free pipelines, which basically means we could run 10 builds in parallel for free per project.
Per project, wow, that's nice.
It's a lot. So being part of the .NET Foundation, obviously gives a lot of other benefits, but they've opened up that DevOps benefit to anyone that's building open source software, which is really cool. So I mean, if we really wanted to get carried away, we could create a project for every single core module that gets 10 free pipelines. I don't think we need that, but we can certainly.
No, but it brings up a good question. I mean, there's obviously too many modules for it all to run off of one account, right?
No, we can create so there's in VSTS, there's a couple different concepts. There's, your build pipeline, which is, your definition. There's a project, which can contain many builds. And then there's your organization, which contains many projects. So we can have, let's say, they give us 10 pipelines for free. So we can have those 10 pipelines per organization that have all the core modules as separate projects. Or we could put all the core modules in one project inside of it. There's a lot of different ways to organize it, but we would still get the DNN platform account or organization would be the appropriate word, has access to the 10 pipelines.
All right. Well, that's good. Definitely to consider. I know you'd probably be interested in being on that team, Andrew, but do we have any other CI experts or something in this that would like to, that would be, I mean, I'd love to learn myself.
I could see, this stuff's really easy to learn just with the GUI experience here. I remember about a month ago, I went through it with Mitch Sellers, and because he was using AppVeyor, and I showed him what you could do with this, and he spent not even a half day, and he was like, this is awesome. And he converted his entire infrastructure over to it.
That's great. Well, cool. We're about 15 minutes before the end now, so I guess we can kind of, unless there's anything else we need to kind of go over on this, we'll move on to next. Anybody have anything else to contribute on this?
Yeah, what's the direction? Is the direction or the action items? Is the action item, we're going to create our own organization in Azure DevOps, and we're going to put the builds in that. And are we going to put the builds in their own projects, or are we going to put them all in one project? My vote would be create, actually, I don't have a vote on that.
I'm kind of ignorant on a lot of this, but it seems like to me it makes more sense because each makes more sense to do one organization account and having all the community repos under that, the projects, just from a management standpoint, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think every maintainer is really going to know how to manage all this anyways.
And then, so I need to highlight one challenge to the approach of having the many builds is if there's a new core module, we have to set it up. And there's going to be that manual effort, which I don't think there's going to be that many new core modules that come into the scene.
No.
Yeah, probably not.
No. The idea from Daniel was just the original core modules, and that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe replace one of them, like forums or active forums, but not create new core modules.
Understood.
I know we've got one that'll be using for meetups, but
it will never be 10 per month. So if there's some manual work and plot, no, it's not a big deal.
Understood.
It's not a big burden or anything.
Okay.
But one question you probably know as well, if I see the README files, I sometimes see the green buttons over there that some tasks or some parts have been finished. How many of them can we use as well in that area? Because most of the core modules or most of the community extensions don't have any of those labels over there.
You talk about
how does that work?
Successful bit. Well, I mean, I won't answer that. I know a little bit about it, but
can you ask that again? I'm not sure if I'm following.
I think he's talking about all of these statuses, like you know, some people use AppVeyor, some people use VSTS, and you have the
that's easy. Yeah, so
that get updated.
I'm not going to pull the screen up again because I don't want to really confuse Daniel with little parts to delete. But if you notice on the README file, I had those build statuses there.
Yep.
So that's a public link. So if we're doing the public project, we'll get a custom link provided as part of the build process to include in the README file, and that's going to be unique for each project.
Okay.
That'd be part of the setup, right? Initially for these anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds like a good direction. So we'll.
And I'm gonna take also. We can write this down in the note as well. I'm gonna do a little bit to see if there is any tasks out there in the marketplace for compiling release notes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Excellent.
There's got to be something.
There are.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it sounds like RSP.
I just typed in release notes, and there is a task. So now I could share my screen again. Look at this. There's it's only got 278 installs. So I'm not sure how much I trust it, but it looks like, like it does something.
There are multiples. There are multiple of these kind of tools, all working a bit different. Some are doing only use the pull request, other ones do only use the pull request and issues. Others subscribe a particular format for your title, for example, of the pull request or the issue. So it will.
So Andrew, maybe you can just take that as a to do, and maybe RSP, if you can post your experience in there, and then we can kind of come back to this next meeting. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to get through a few other things. I don't know if we have any update. I don't know, Peter, if you know kind of where store module with Jos Lepage. I can't say his last name.
Lepage.
I didn't do too bad then.
No.
I don't know where we kind of stood with that one, but I know there's a little bit of discussion going on about that one. And I think Peter's probably occupied at the moment. On the extensions catalog, so a bit of an update today. I just posted a blog on the DNN Software community blog about NV QuickPulse, which was really
I saw your video. I saw your video
excellent.
that you posted for Clint, I think.
Yes. So that blog's out there now. The app is available on Android and iOS to be able to browse all the open source projects in the community related to DNN. And that was really kind of a first step for me to kind of understand the GitHub API, what we can, what we can't do, what the limitations are, and that kind of thing. So I think now we can circle back, EPT, to the original idea of trying to get some of those stats surfaced through the open content implementation of the extensions catalog on the DNN Connect site. Whew, that was a mouthful. I have all the code from Timo for that. So I had a to-do a while back that was going to set up that repo and get additional commit done.
Just rethink, do we need the DNN Connect catalog if your NV Quick Pulse serves the same purpose?
Well, it's a mobile context versus a a desktop experience on the. So I think, and also that extensions catalog is more than just the GitHub stuff. Of course, it doesn't have every GitHub either. So I think it'll bring up some good questions as we kind of work to maybe do some integration. But I'm kind of thinking of a real rudimentary approach first, where if there is a GitHub link on the extension, that's listed in the catalog, then we can try to surface some of those stats in there. I think the questions are, hey, what is most valuable? I think I mentioned this briefly last time, but some of the challenges with the GitHub API is that the statistics API itself doesn't give you a whole lot. So you really kind of have to use some of the other endpoints and aggregate and create your own statistics from there. And there are some limits on how many requests you can make per minute and that type of thing. So I'd really like to kind of answer some of the questions of, okay, using NV Quick Pulse, now that people have something to look at, are these stats what people really want to see? Are there other ones that would provide more value? Should we get rid of some of them? That kind of thing. And once we answer those questions, then we can circle back and really kind of put some effort towards the open content integration of that.
Okay, understand. If I look at interesting points for me, and I think Andrew already mentioned one, is the number of downloads or the latest release, something like that. And the idea about the extensions catalog, that it could also contain some kind of review mechanism or stars, giving stars, so people, let's say, go through the list and see which are popular and which are not popular. And then indeed, you can use your NV Quick Pulse experience and produce those figures additionally. I think it would be easy if we store the information once it's retrieved, store in the dnnconnect.org tables. So you don't have to retrieve it every time again, because it doesn't change that much over time.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think there's some ways to deal with, we were talking about a little bit of the caching capabilities and stuff there as well. So you can probably get around. I mean, it's not super limiting the way it is. I think it's like 30 requests per minute that you can make. So, that's per site doing it. The thing is, when it's on a website and you have multiple people viewing the catalog at the same time, then those requests can get used up very quickly. So,
well, are you calling the API directly from the device?
Yes. So from the mobile app, it's not a big deal because that's per person that is using it. So that person's IP address.
So it is by IP address?
Yeah, it is. So, but on the website, it would all be coming from one IP address, right? So it doesn't know the context of a user in that case.
I thought, for some reason, I thought you said that, or I was just assuming that the GitHub API was throttling based off like an API key.
Now it can, the NV Quick Pulse, I kept it completely open, but you can use their authentication. The problem at that point is then it opens up a whole can of worms. The person that's using this, I don't want them to have a GitHub account, because if they're an administrator or a content editor and they just really kind of want to see what's out there, chances are they're not going to have a GitHub account. So it balancing act, I guess, on
exactly.
So
you're muted. I don't hear you.
That's
better.
For some reason, it's automatically muting when I activate another window.
Does it analyze what you're saying and then starts to mute or not?
It says, "Oh, that guy's talking again. Let's mute him." So, of the rest of these, are there any areas that we absolutely need to use the last 4 minutes here to talk about, or are we're pretty much good?
Fine for me.
I'm good.
Okay.